Oops, no, that's not that. Okay.
We can see it.
Oh, you can see the presentation?
Well, now we can see ourselves.
Okay. I'm sorry, I've not used Teams before for presentations, only I'm not used to doing this. So I'm sharing. Oh, wait, I don't want to share my screen. I want to share.
You should have an option to share just the presentation.
Yeah. Layout. Sorry about this. Okay, when I do the sharing, share content. Here we go. Window. As the presentation. That's it. Got it. You getting that now?
Perfect. Looks good.
Great. Yep. Okay. Oh, great. Good morning. I'm Greg Garrard. I'm Professor of Environmental Humanities at UBC Okanagan in Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada. UBC Okanagan is on the traditional unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan First Nation. And this research was obviously carried out on that territory. I'll introduce Madeline. Madeline undertook a lot of her research in a very conscious relationship to that tradition. So, Maddie.
And my PhD, which I finished last year, was toward its end largely focused on the waterway we'll be talking about today.
Yeah. And so this presentation is also uses elements that have been contributed by doctoral candidates Janitor Ferdous and Daisy Pullman, and also master student Jalal Sarami. And it's supported by Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. Although, as I mentioned, that grant has now basically run out, and so I'm just kind of trying to get some of the things done that I hope to get done with very little money left. So I want to just situate situate Brandt's Creek, and this is going to be a process of like quite dramatic zooming in. What you can see there is the Okanagan Basin, the Okanagan watershed. It runs from Armstrong in the north. The long lake there is Okanagan Lake, which is probably about 130 odd kilometers long. People give different estimates. And then the Okanagan River flows down across the US border, changes its name to the Okanagan River, south of the border for reasons I don't yet fully understand. Maybe Maddie does. And it joins the Columbia River at Brewster, Washington. So this is the watershed that we're going to be talking about, but really we're talking about a particular tributary in the city of Kelowna, which you can see there on the map, just sort of 3/4 of the way up and about halfway down Lake Okanagan. Maddie, by the way, if you needless to say, if I'm getting anything wrong or if there's anything you want to add. So in a lot of these,
I guess I can just footnote the change of name, as the story I've heard is that it's simply a dialogic thing. So south of the border, the anglicization of the Insilchan word, so the language of the Syilx people is called Insilchan, and the anglicization of the word for this river system has just manifested differently in the two places.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. So by all means, interrupt me if you want to add something. So this is Brewster, Washington. That's where the Okanagan meets the Columbia River. And just to give you a slightly larger context for the research and the Brandt's Creek issue, the grant that I got from SSHRC was about what I called cultures of nature in the Okanagan Valley. that's really my research interests is in the broadest sense in sort of nature culture interactions, and I'm sure everyone here present will know that those are both obdurate and somewhat misleading categories to begin with. But what particularly interested me about the Okanagan, despite my accent, I'm actually Canadian by nationality, and my granddad lived in the Okanagan, and my family had been there for a long time. So when we moved there in 2013 from the UK, I was really I noticed these magazine covers on utility boxes. That you can see this magazine called Beautiful British Columbia, and this was an enormously popular and influential and very widely distributed magazine from 1959 to 1983, that promoted British Columbia, the province, to the rest of Canada, to the US, and to the world. And no other province had anything like it. And this is just one example of how the Okanagan became this idealized site in the Canadian cultural imagination. And I think it continues to have that role to this day. In part, that's because it's one of very, very few areas of Canada with something approximating a Mediterranean climate that's suitable for growing peaches and has wineries and so forth. And it seemed to me that there was something interesting to be said and thought about the ways in which this idealization had direct impact on the landscape itself. And so a lot of what the grant-funded activity has been about has actually been about the ways in which, unlike the American Okanagan, the landscape in the Okanagan is a sort of physical manifestation of the idealization, the cultural idealization of the Canadian Okanagan. And so this is a photograph, Maddie, 1933. 1910. Okay, can you tell us what we're seeing there, Maddie?
Yeah, so what you see now is what the image is now completely built up as the town of Kelowna, or the city of Kelowna. At the time, the town, let's call it a township, was back. So we're looking south, where you see the buildings and the trees, and those trees are part of a riparian ecosystem around two larger, more cohesive bodies of water that are much more well known in the city of Kelowna today as Mill Creek and Mission Creek. And those trees are part of a riparian ecosystem. But here in the front is what ends up getting called the Kelowna floodplain. And there were only low trees here. So here a lot of it has already been turned into agricultural fields. And these are seasonal agricultural fields. They would have also been grazing grounds at the time for cattle that had been brought by Europeans. But the vegetation you also see is being different. So this floodplain system and the riparian ecosystem behind it to the south of it have different characteristics. And this floodplain is where Brandt's Creek ended up being cohered as a waterway.
Right. And so here we've got an aerial photograph, a later aerial photograph from 1938. So the photograph we just saw was from the top of this photo looking down. You can see that already you have log booms down there on the left-hand side. That's where the lumber mill built up. That's also where the railway eventually terminated. And you can see snaking across the photo there, there's a mazy creek. And also, I think a horse racing track. Is that the first thing that goes in there?
Yeah, that's a horse racing track. So this photo, we don't have this data, but we basically determined that this photo was taken in the spring. So this photo would have been taken when snow was beginning to melt. You no longer see any snow on the hills here. So this is a sort of moving into freshet season photo. The point at the left side of the image is called Manhattan Point, and it was originally by the settlers conceived as a sort of vacation spot. So that's where you would have your vacation cottage, to which you would canoe from town, which as it happens is some 3 kilometers, perhaps less, south of there. But that image, for me, that image is really stark because it shows just how much water runs through this place that now in this image from 1969 you see has been drained to create what effectively gets treated as dry land.
Yeah, and that's so. This is the year of my birth, 1969. You can see here that Manhattan Point has holiday cottages. The horse racing track has been turned into a baseball field, and what becomes known as Brandt's Creek runs alongside the road that you can see there called Recreation Avenue. So if you can see a baseball diamond there on the lower right hand side, then you have that Brandt's Creek is running. It's still not completely channelized, and comes out to the left alongside is that a railway dock? It might be.
So yeah, the railway dock was actually where the railway was built. The course of the creek was changed, but that dock is in fact to load barges. That said, most of the barges would have also been loaded from the what are we calling this? The lumber mill.
Yeah. And that lumber mill only closed definitively about 3 years ago, was it? 3-4 years ago?
Yeah, definitively.
So, yeah. And so that area that you can see to the top left, which is which is the lumber mill, is now part of a major redevelopment into homes and businesses, mostly homes. So what I was going to now just show you is just a couple of examples of what I described earlier about the difference between the American Okanagan and the Canadian Okanagan, and how some of those differences might make differences to the biogeographical landscape, biogeophysical landscape. So you've got the population change here. You can see is pretty much flat south of the border. Whereas the population in the Canadian Okanagan is going up and continues to go on up. And this is, I think, quite a striking image. The image on the left is of 2019 land cover, satellite land cover. That's the one on the left is the Canadian Okanagan. The one on the right is the US Okanagan. We have a time series of this, but I won't put that up as well. But now, in part, this is that there's precipitation differences. The Canadian Okanagan is much steeper on the sides of the valley, but there's also just a great deal more intensive urban development that you can see there in the center of the center left and all along the shores of Lake Okanagan. And also much more intensive agricultural development. There's some more intensive agricultural development to the south of the U.S. Okanagan, down by the Columbia River, but it's both sparse in population and much less intensively developed, for the pretty obvious reason that the United States has much larger areas of this kind of shrub steppe biome and Mediterranean climate. It's just much.
I would add to that also, Greg, that there are two crucial crops involved here. Yes. So apples and grapes. Mm-hmm. Apples were grown throughout the Okanagan and the Okanagan Valley very intensively as a sort of initial settler crop, or one of the first orchard crops that was grown. Most of the U.S. apples grown in the U.S. are still grown in northeastern eastern Washington, which is the area we're talking about, and because, like Greg said, because the U.S. has a lot more opportunity to grow crops like grapes, who require certain ecological conditions, and Canada definitely doesn't. A lot of the orchards in the Okanagan, both apple and peach, in the Canadian Okanagan, have been turned into now vineyards, which has done a particular thing both for the economy and for the land, specifically in terms of water usage. So the intensification of the agriculture has almost gone faster in the Canadian Okanagan because of this scarcity in the country.
Yeah, and also because of protectionist policies that keep the Canadian wine industry alive. And so now we move on to Brandt's Creek itself. As you can see, I know this is a River Cities network, and this doesn't probably deserve the name of river, but this is a photograph of part of Brandt's Creek. Running alongside it is Weddell Avenue. it's describe the creek, Maddie, like in terms of its size, and what would you see?
Yeah, so I took this image, I took this photograph. I thought it was amazing that the road is literally crumbling into the creek. Yeah. And the debate is very much not whether it is a creek or a river, but whether it is a ditch or a creek. I I had someone once tell me that it simply wasn't a creek and therefore we didn't care about it. And you know, opinions vary. Let's say it's also treated very much like a ditch. So in the sense that here you see the road crumbling in places it's paved over. It is very disregarded in the urban cultural imaginary. There's a park upstream called Brandt's Creek Linear Park that people do know about. And even people who live and work right alongside this body of water that you see in this image, which is downstream at valley level, don't know that it exists, but they do know about the park upstream. So it's a place that actually, where this image was taken, on the other side of it, there's also a current city sort of managed encampment for people without homes. And this is a place that's treated very much like a lot like people who are unhoused are often treated, with kind of perfunctory engagement. And also it has really important plants. So in this particular image, you see both a well-known invasive or invading tree called the Russian olive tree, and also tule reeds. And tule reeds are traditionally used by Syilx people in all sorts of construction, as all sorts of construction material, and not only in the Okanagan, but also down into, through similar climates where they grow, into what is now California. Anything else to say about that, Greg?
Yeah, let me see. So these photographs were taken. So what we're going to be seeing now is basically a series of photos that mostly Maddie took, or were taken of Maddie while she was she was doing her research. And you know, the landing on Brandt's Creek as a focus was a bit adventitious, let's say. But it really kind of, for me, it aligns with the rest of the project, because one of the habitats, perhaps the habitat that has been most impacted by the differential development of the Canadian Okanagan, has been riparian habitats in this semi-arid shrub steppe biome. It's those sort of bottomland habitats that are particularly have been particularly affected. This one obviously has gone way beyond, you know, being affected, and is actually kind of what we're looking at, and what we're trying to get the city on board with is actually a revitalization, though not a restoration, of that riparian habitat. So
I'll speak to that difference, Greg.
Yeah,
if you don't.
Yeah, please.
So Brandt's Creek wasn't only affected, it was created. The initial effect was its creation. So it was not pre-colonial, settler colonial development. It was not a cohesive body of water. We saw in that original aerial image from 1938 that the water went wherever it decided to, and the only reason it coheres as a creek today is because it was channelized, because it was turned into effectively not even really an irrigation ditch, but more a, how do we get the water out of the land to make it land and not water, and effectively get this water into the lake as quickly as possible so we can build on this land. These images, one of them, the one on the right, was taken because I thought the neglected irrigation or water transference infrastructure was just indicative of how the creek is treated. And the other is actually of a species of tree, the Siberian elm, that is widely hated and also very good at growing and very good at distributing itself through the Okanagan. And also here being protected from the beaver because it's doing the very important job of holding up this bank, this stream bank, in addition to these sandbags positioned behind it. So yeah, my work was situated in the Okanagan about Okanagan riparian habitats and floodplain habitats and how people interact with them, how people come to know them. And as as part of this work, I and myself and a few colleagues started a puppet making project. So the idea was that we would make riparian character puppets, so plants and animals, critters, beings that exist in the riparian space, and make the riparian space what it is in the Okanagan. And we made these things not ourselves per se. In fact, I did very little of the making myself. I served more as a project manager, but we made them in open community art workshops. Thanks to a number of grants, we were able to make these workshops free, and people could come. We were once a week. For 33 weeks. Do I remember the exact number? No. People could come every Monday evening and just help us with this project of creating these larger than life, often larger than life, sometimes smaller than life, riparian characters to both help people create relationships themselves and also help people become aware of these beings that create this habitat that is so important to the Okanagan. You can switch, Greg.
Yeah. And this had not been envisaged in the original SHOT grant application, but I was really delighted that Maddie took this on.
Yeah, not envisaged, not a typical research project, but this is what our workshop room looked like. If we had been able to embed the time lapse of one of our workshops in the presentation, I would have liked to have shown you that, but hélas. Here you see some beginnings of some trees, some bark of a cottonwood tree. This space was a space in which people, I was shocked that people came to these workshops. They came for all kinds of reasons. One person told me that it was just really nice to make a mess somewhere other than her own home. I have just an endless amount of wonderful stories from the interactions in this place and how people's relationships, both with art and with the riparian, were being created and strengthened in this space. I can't say enough good things about this project. It was very, very hard. I had never done anything like this before, but so rewarding when people, for instance, are sitting at a table making, actually you see some of the flowers here in this photo, these white flowers on this sort of crown type thing on the table, sitting making flowers and learning that these are Saskatoon flowers that they're recreating, and saying, oh, I've heard lots of people talk about the Saskatoon plant, but I've never actually noticed it outside before, but now I'm going to look for it. And that, yeah, that was pretty cool. Okay, great. Here we see a Saturday, this man's name is Saturday. He was a regular at our workshops, and he's trying to create, this puppet really never got off the ground, but he's trying to recreate a cattail, the being of a cattail, which is another very important, both traditionally and in present day, very important plant for the ecosystem and for the Syilx people. Oh, and that specifically for water quality, actually. And Kathy Stuvington on my left, I guess everyone's left. Here was our puppet consultant. She's a master puppeteer, mostly puppets of large, what get called carnival puppets, so large size. Here she's just demonstrating how one might walk as a juniper bush. And on the right that's myself sitting on the ground doing some remedial puppet surgery and speaking with Pamela Barnes, who is an elder in the Syilx community and was very supportive of this project throughout. It was so, yeah, it was beyond amazing to have Pam and her family there to, I mean, really just champion it. I told her about the idea one year at a festival, and she said, that's a great idea, let's do that. And then the next year at the festival, we had all of the puppets there dancing along. So, the relationships that we build with people in the Syilx community, these relationships are both difficult to build and difficult to maintain and very important. And we put a lot of pressure, specifically in the Canadian Academy right now, on researchers to build these relationships, and sometimes it doesn't go well, and I think it doesn't go well often because of that pressure. But this project really allowed for a lot of fun and lightness to be brought into this collaboration. And when Pam could be present, she was, but she was always in favor, and she was always ready to champion this project and to tell people about it and to send people our way. And yeah, I will forever be grateful to her for that.
And Maddie, I think it's also just worth saying, because I know you're a very modest person, that actually, you know, what seemed to me to be so critical to that, first of all, was the complete commitment to reciprocity that you brought to that. You know, that there was the risk, as we know, is always of what is perceived, and often is, in fact, an extractive relationship, and yours was anything but. And I think the other thing is that is the just the importance of always showing up. You know, I fear and I suspect that often kind of academics will initiate relationships with people, First Nations people, and then kind of show up erratically or operate to their own timetables and so forth. Again, it's a point about reciprocity. And I think that what you demonstrated was just kind of complete commitment and always showing up. So I just think it's really important to acknowledge your contribution to that.
Thanks, Greg. I agree. I think showing up is maybe the one sort of most succinct thing you can say as being crucial to this relationship building.
Yeah. Look at that.
Yeah, so as it happens, the Saskatoon is being well featured in this presentation. So these are the white flowers I was talking about earlier, and a beautiful photo taken actually by one of our faculty. Fabulous faculty people. And this was actually our first Bring the Puppets into the Wild event.
And that the Saskatoon is it looks like a blueberry, but it's actually a pome fruit, and it's really delicious. Has a sort of a really nice, yummy, sweet, nutty flavor.
They're called service berries in many parts of on the continent. And I've seen them in the UK. I've seen them in Switzerland. They've also made their way around. And this is our rubber boa, which, you know, just needed repairs all the time. It's amazing how a whole bunch of amateurs working with cardboard can both make something so cool and then also for it to really not work quite as well as you want it to. But here it's working beautifully, and I'm very proud of this picture. This was also the first day out, and it was amazing to see not only that the puppets both worked and made the kind of impact that we wanted them to. You know, especially the children were very excited about this giant snake in the sky. But they also created, and here you can see it quite well, this shadow effect. Okanagan is a very sunny place. This day was a June day. It was, as you can see, warm. And shadow puppets are their own whole world. But the fact that if you make something very big, it casts a shadow. And it felt a little bit like a metaphor for the project. And also specifically, it was just aesthetically beautiful to see those shadows created by the puppets. And I think this is our last puppet photo. This is just an example of our bees. Some of these bees, you see a child's name labeled here. We had a few workshops with kids. This is the most accessible giant puppet that we could think of to make with children. And these were made by a group of kids from the Friendship Center who were much too young to be left alone puppet making, and everyone had papier-mâché in their hair, and it was wild. But here we are. We made some bees, and they were always really, really flashy, the bees.
So I'll pick up the story now, and it's much less fun after this, and much less visual. So what I wanted to try and do out of this sort of cultural engagement project was to get people interested in the idea of a revitalization of Brandt's Creek. besides all this work that Maddie did with the puppets and going to the festivals and having people in the workshop and so on, the part that what she did that was truly invaluable was just being in and around Brandt's Creek itself and meeting people and just immediately engaging them in conversation, and then putting me in touch with people that were people that cared about the creek, people that cared about the environment in the city. And so when she moved back to the Netherlands, I was put in touch with some of those people like Bev Kalnikoff from the Kelowna Tree Protectors, and really so as I sometimes kind of just observe as a management of expectations, I'm a literature professor. I've never, like, apart from books and articles, I've never made anything. I have no experience at all of local politics, political process, or for that matter urban planning, anything of that sort. And it was really remarkable for me to be put in touch with leaders in civil society in the city. Most of them were, as I suppose they probably are in many places, they were retired people who energetically lead small civil society groups that are aiming to improve the immediate environment of the city. And the other people that Maddie met and put me in touch with were staff from the City of Kelowna, and we had a meeting in September 2023, I think it was, with a really high-level meeting actually of City of Kelowna staff, where I described what we'd been thinking about, and I'll show you a picture of what we kind of landed on as a sort of provisional plan, if you like. Maddie had put me in touch with all of these staffers, and they were really, really impressed with the idea. They each with their own portfolios, from water quality to city parks to arts and culture, could see how a revitalization of this particular space would add value to a part of the city that had been disregarded. And as Maddie said, the fact that there was and is what is described as a temporary encampment for unhoused people, it kind of is both a sign and symptom of that disregard. And since then, I've done a presentation to council. One of the things that the staff has observed and reminded me of is that as staff, they're not allowed to initiate things. They're responsive to political direction. So thanks to Bev, I did a presentation to council and on Brandt's Creek, and I also sent I got another small grant from the university to develop a visualization of what we had in mind, to engage with local business owners, and so that led in turn to kind of conversations with individual councillors. I will just say that just two things about the presentation to council. It was kind of a fascinating experience for me because so Bev, when there's a public hearing, you get 5 minutes each. Is it 5 minutes each? Yeah. And so what she had was herself and a whole series of her allies in the Kelowna Tree Protectors, and they would they had themselves lined up so that they actually got 20 minutes. So each of them did 5 minutes, and they would say something to the councillors, and then the councillors would turn to the staffers and say, "Oh, what do you think about this?" And the staffers would go, "Oh, we think this is a really good idea," because of course she's already talked to them about it. And so there was this really interesting sort of kind of politics of civil society, political leadership, and the kind of city experts that I saw on display there. And I know we've come. Oh, that's one more image. So I know we've got. I think we're 55 minutes in. So I'll just say a couple of things about this idea. First of all, it is envisaged as a landscape scale eco art project. And part of the reason for that, firstly, because I think it would be very cool to have one in the city on that, the kinds of things that I know have been done in the Netherlands, in the UK and elsewhere, where water and land are the elements of a large scale artwork, an artwork which of course is intended to change over time. But apart from that, I think it's important, as Maddie said earlier, to kind of resist the idea of that this is going back to something. It's very tempting to talk about these sorts of things as a restoration. We're not going to restore anything. It's not like that. It can't be like that. And so that's, it's kind of conspicuous artifice as an important part of it. Another piece that is important, and which I at one point thought that I was going to try to really get involved with, and then realized I didn't have the time or the skill set, is about the importance of involving the unhoused community. The city is determined to reduce long-term homelessness and I support that objective. At the same time, I also, neither I nor Maddie nor anybody I know wants to be involved in green gentrification. So it's been very important at all stages to explore ways in which people transitioning out of homelessness could be involved in planning and implementing and maintaining this change. And I've emphasized that to the city all the way through. But this just gives you some sense of some of the elements that we'd like to see. One of them is the BC Wildlife Federation, has been putting in what they call beaver dam analogs in streams all around the province. I mean, I'd prefer it was actually done by a beaver, but I'm not sure the city's ready for that. Maybe there will be. And I also would love to see an active transportation overpass there, because Ethel Street is the city's main active transportation corridor, and that could be both a connection and a somewhere from which to view the transformed, revitalized Brandt's Creek. But I think that's all we need to say about it. Thank you. I will stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Greg and Madeline, for a fascinating presentation and really some innovative ideas here. And I'm sure there's a lot of interest in what you have been doing and questions. So let's